The sun was shining brightly in the blue sky above the snow-capped mountains. The sun shone brightly in the blue sky above the mountains. The silence was broken by the sound of a hammer hammering a nail into the wall. After finishing, the owner of the hammer, who turned out to be some guy, looked at the result of his work with admiration. Standing in front of the beautiful building he had just finished constructing, he looked around and said that it should have been enough. The next moment tears appeared on his face, but they weren't tears of sadness or sorrow. They were tears of joy because he finally had his own restaurant. This happy crying guy's name was Ellison. He was a 9th grade Archmage, and the main character of this story. However, his story started much earlier, namely 15 years ago, when he was walking home from school as usual. He had always wanted to be a chef and was currently walking home to practice cooking. He went to high school where there was a culinary arts club. His biggest dream was to become a chef after graduation and open a small restaurant. However, his dream was not destined to come true, as it was crushed along with a truck, which was the last thing he saw. But to his surprise, his life was not over. When he woke up, he found before his eyes a landscape of a completely unfamiliar world. Trying to come to his senses, he sat up and wondered what this place was. However, as soon as he looked up, everything became clear. In front of him was nothing but a fantasy world from some novel. However, the place he was in was far from peaceful. Suddenly, a hand grabbed his shoulder and a man's voice called out to him. Frightened, Ellison turned around and saw a man with a backpack behind his back, who told him in a firm voice to pack, because if he didn't, he would die on the road. Not understanding what was going on or what the man was saying, he looked around. As it turned out, many people with backpacks behind their backs were going somewhere. He called out to the man who was leaving and asked him where they were. Thinking that the man was a stranger because of his clothes, he answered that the town was called Grake and was located on the outskirts of the Rurin Empire. Then he looked at the burning city and added that he didn't expect red dragons to appear in such a remote area. As it turned out, the world he had been summoned to had monsters, magic, and an empire that was currently at war with the dragons. This was not the most pleasant news for a man who just wanted to be a cook. However, since he had no choice, all he had to do was what humans were very good at, namely adapting and accepting the current situation as quickly as possible. So to begin with, he decided to think positive, and even if he was hit by a truck, he still had a second chance. Besides, he believed that the world couldn't be as bad as it might seem at first glance. Besides, he didn't have to join the army here, which was great news. Suddenly, the main character's musings were interrupted by the sound of hooves, followed by a man on horseback, who turned to everyone and shouted that they had received a decree from His Majesty. Taking out a scroll, he loudly began to read the decree, which said that the fate of the country was in their hands, since there was no place left to escape from those damned dragons. Despair appeared on the faces of some of the people listening. The man continued reading, saying that now it was their turn to stand up for their country. Hearing this, people raised their hands to support him. Raising his hand, the man shouted loudly, saying that the king was ordering, "Let us fight, in the name of the knight." In the middle of the crowd of shouting people who were ready to give their lives for the empire, there was a guy who stood out not only because of his strange clothes, but also because of his eyes, which were filled with despair. On the day he was summoned, the Luverne Empire was in crisis because of the Dragon War, and because of that, the military power provided by the mercenaries was not enough. As a result, the government had to recruit for military service. And regardless of status, all men between the ages of 17 and 45 were drafted into the ranks of the temporary knights. And our protagonist was no exception. And a moment later, before he had time to come to his senses, he stood with a sword in his hands at the entrance to the barracks, where he was now to live for the near future. After a while, they began drills, one of which taught them to shout loudly in the name of His Majesty the Emperor. While shouting loudly along with everyone else, he tearfully reflected to himself that it would have been years better to die by the truckload by now. That was how his service as a knight began. One day, one of the commanders suddenly approached him and showed him a piece of paper, informing the surprised protagonist that his magical potential was quite high. Because of this, when he leaves the training center, he will be enrolled in the Magic Corps. After a while, after receiving his portion of food, which didn't look very edible, especially for someone who wanted to become a chef, Ellison reflected that being an archmage was better than fighting with a sword. As he tasted the food, he immediately grimaced in disgust, telling himself that he had never tasted anything worse. But the guys sitting next to him didn't think so, as they tasted the food and said that it was not bad. Their words struck the protagonist very much, because he could not believe that there was something worse than this, suggesting that the people of this world may simply have no taste. But seeing them devour such unpalatable food, it struck him. After all, if he opened a restaurant with delicious food here, it would surely be a success. And from that very moment, he decided for himself that no matter what, he would not miss his second chance and realize his dream. Even if it requires undergoing grueling training, or fighting the dragons that were just another obstacle to his dream. The war went on, and all the while, it was his dream that gave him strength, and the hope that he would be able to leave after 3 years of service. However, if he had known then that the war would last not far from 3 years, but 15, he wouldn't have been sure he'd have been able to keep fighting. Let's finish with the sad and return to the present time, in which there were no more wars, and there was peace. Walking by Ellison's restaurant, some woman looked at him and was surprised, because she couldn't remember seeing this store here before. But what surprised her even more was some guy standing outside the store crying. Seeing his tears, which kept flowing in streams, the woman concluded that he had probably gone through a really hard time. Approaching him, she asked if he was okay, to which our protagonist turned around and replied that he was, adding that he was just happy that he was finally able to open his own restaurant. Hearing this, she asked him if he was the owner of the restaurant, to which Ellison replied that he was. When she extended her hand, she said with a smile that her name was Rain. Shaking her hand, he replied that she could call him L. She added that he must have moved here recently, as she had not seen him here before. Rain replied that she was quite right. Rain also asked if he lived alone, to which he replied that he did not, adding that he lived with a friend he met at the service, who slept a lot, so he wouldn't wake up until the evening. At the same time, in one of the rooms, someone was sleeping sweetly on the bed. Turning to the main character, the woman said with a smile that since he was opening a restaurant, he probably needed a place where he could buy meat. He replied that he did, and he was just about to find out if there was a butcher store in town. When she heard that, she happily replied that her husband had a butcher shop, and then explained how he could find it. This was a great suggestion to Elle, and he replied that he would go there right away. Before he went, Rain warned him, saying that her husband had a bit of a tough temper, adding that if he was too tough, he could just tell her that she had sent him there. Elle thanked her and said he would, thinking to himself that she was a good person. He also thought about what kind of husband she was, if he had a wife like that. But as soon as he arrived at the butcher shop, he was met by a bearded man who looked at him with an annoyed and intimidating look and asked him why he had come here. Elle immediately turned pale from such pressure and lost all confidence. He trembled with fear, avoiding the man's intimidating gaze. Stammering said that he was the owner of the restaurant and wanted to order some meat from him, to which he immediately thumped his fist loudly on the table and replied that he did not sell. Then, when the protagonist asked him why, he said that he didn't sell, and that was the end of it. In a furious voice, he said that he had seen many people like him who bought meat from him at a cheap price and then sold it for twice as much. Elle continued to listen in silence to the irritated words of the man who continued to accuse him, thinking that he must have had a hard time if he was so angry. This probably would have gone on for a long time, but the next moment the man was stopped by a blow to his head, accompanied by a question about what he was carrying. Holding the frying pan in her hands, Rain said in a fierce voice that she had come because she knew this was what would happen. Then with a sigh, she apologized to Elle for the inconvenience, then asked what kind of meat he wanted. The man immediately began to resent her, talking about how hard it was for him to cut the meat. But the woman irritatedly told him to shut up, asking why he was blaming the guy for all of this. At the same time, the protagonist was watching from the sidelines and wanted to go home more than ever. After subduing her husband, Rain sent him to get some meat. She apologized again, adding that her husband had a bitter experience with betrayal when he was still a mercenary, which made him like that. Elle replied that it was fine, then asked if her husband was a mercenary. She answered that he was, then added that when she thought about it, he didn't seem very old. Then she asked him if he had been drafted. He replied that he had been through a lot of bad things in the last 15 years. When the man returned, he put a bag on the table with a clatter and then irritatedly shouted that it was the guy's meat. Upon opening the bag and seeing the contents, the protagonist awkwardly asked if it was the meat he had been promised. The man laughed evilly and replied that he thought he would give him the precious Bellerin meat, adding that he would only supply it to restaurants that he approved of. At the same time behind him, his wife took the form of a demon, exuding a murderous aura. The unsuspecting man, seconds before his death, told the protagonist that he should make a delicious meal out of this meat, adding that if he didn't satisfy him, he wouldn't see a single bite from then on. Mr. Knoll proudly announces his sophisticated taste for exquisite and delicious cuisine and warns Elle to brace himself for what is to come. Lost in his thoughts, Elle becomes the target of Mr. Knoll's mockery, with him suggesting that Elle might be getting scared of him already. The mockery continues until Mr. Knoll is unexpectedly knocked out cold by his wife, Rain with the frying pan. She reassures Elle by describing her husband as a tough guy and the hit from the pan won't injure him at all. She advises him to ignore the mocking words, assuring him that Mr. Knoll was simply joking and he doesn't have to do as he says. However, Elle brushes off the mockery, expressing his willingness to cook for Rain and Mr. Knoll. Surprising Rain, Elle accepts Mr. Knoll's challenge and invites both of them to join him for dinner at his restaurant in the evening. He promises to create a delicious meal that would surpass any skepticism. Despite Rain's skepticism, Elle remains confident and pledges to whip up something mouthwatering. Rain decides to test Elle's culinary skills by offering him some Bellerin meat, but Elle declines, insisting that the meat he gets is enough. Confidently, Elle pledges to create something delightful, but Rain warns him that the meat in the sack is just ordinary wuba belly fat, which is the local term for pigs in this world. Livestock has different names in this world, with cows called wuka, chickens called palenkyu, wolves called Bellerin, and pigs known as wuba. Back at his restaurant, recognizing the quality of the pork belly, Elle understands why Mr. Knoll took pride in such top-notch meat. Despite the locals considering palenku a luxury ingredient, Elle feels they didn't truly appreciate the allure of the meat in front of him. Seeing the pork belly, Elle decides that grilling is the best way to savor it. With a flick of his hand, he conjures a ball of flame, starting a fire for the grill. Meanwhile, as Rain and Mr. Knoll are heading toward the restaurant, the couple engages in a heated discussion about the events at the butcher shop. Rain questions her husband about the need for approval when selling meat to a restaurant, wondering when he adopted such a fancy principle. She expresses her belief that Elle seems like an honest and kind newcomer who deserves to be treated nicely. Mr. Knoll defends himself, stating that Rain has only met Elle that morning, and she couldn't possibly know Elle's true personality so soon. Rain, slightly irritated, counters Mr. Knoll's perspective, suggesting that rather than being deceived with both eyes open, he should consider that other people's eyes are more accurate. She sees through Mr. Knoll's excuse of checking Elle's skills and points out that he is merely testing Elle's sense of responsibility. Her words made Mr. Knoll silent, realizing she had a point. Attempting to save his pride, he claims to have a discerning palate, questioning Rain about what would happen if Elle's cooking skills fell short of expectations. In a flashback, we see a humanoid monster with razor-sharp teeth giving out a deafening scream. A knight struck hard by a massive club falls to the ground. Another knight, realizing the overwhelming numbers, orders for a retreat. In the chaos, a soldier trapped under rubble cries out for help. A menacing monster raises its club, targeting the helpless soldier who continues pleading for assistance. Then, Elle steps forward, invoking the magical skill Thermal Blade. Light radiates from his hand, cutting through the monsters with blade-like precision. Even the rubble was reduced to pieces, providing an opening for the trapped soldier to be rescued. The knights, astonished by Elle's sudden intervention, greeted him with a mix of relief and respect, hailing him as a powerful mage, a great archmage, cheering at his arrival and calling him Sir Ellison. In the present, Elle employs the same magical skill, Thermal Blade, not for battling monsters, but for an ordinary yet vital task. He casually uses it to slice the meat, ensuring the marinade seeps deep into every fiber as it is cooked. The surface moisture evaporates, promising a crispy texture for whoever savors it. Wiping his hands, Elle declared the meat ready. The doorbell chimes. The door creaks open, and Rain and Mr. Knoll are welcomed by Elle. They are asked to take a seat as he prepares to serve the dish. In a matter of moments, Rain admires the tavern, noting its cleanliness and orderliness. She praises the place, finding it appealing. But her husband remains unimpressed, dismissing it as merely clean and nothing more. Undeterred by Knoll's grumpiness, Rain pulls out her frying pan and requests him to be patient, assuring him that the food will be served soon, despite his stupid agreement. With slight nervousness, Elle is waiting in the kitchen. Mindful of the pork belly's natural fat, he lightly coats the griller with oil to ensure the meat won't stick. Placing it upside down, he muses that with more time, he could have prepared an even better dish. As the pork begins to sizzle, the delightful sound enhances the anticipation of the meal. Carefully frying the skin and adjusting the heat for even grilling, Elle adds a sprinkle of salt to enhance the flavors. He grills the meat thoroughly, cutting it into convenient serving sizes. Next, he prepares a vegetable salad, hesitating slightly as he considers the locals' unfamiliarity with the flavors. Despite this, he continues, incorporating various vegetables and a tangy dressing to complement the richness of the grilled pork belly. All decide to keep it simple, suspecting Knoll's meticulous taste might not appreciate unnecessary additions. Nicely plated, the salad and grilled pork belly are ready. Elle serves the food, and Rain is pleasantly surprised by its appetizing appearance. However, Knoll grumbles, dismissing it as mere appearance and nothing more. Rain, with her fork, samples a bite of the grilled pork belly. As the flavors unfolded in her mouth, she couldn't help but compare it to a taste of heaven. Surprised, she turns to Elle, questioning if it was genuinely wuba meat. Elle confidently affirms that it is indeed. Rain shares her experience, describing the grilled pork belly as delightfully crispy on the outside and bursting with juiciness within. The refreshing aroma of the salad complements and balances the dish, a combination she never anticipated. Expressing her love for the food, Rain's praise brought a smile to Elle's face. Pleased with the meal, Rain promises to supply meat for Elle in the future so she can enjoy his cooking again. Elle thanks her and shifts his attention to Noel, inquiring about his meal. To Elle's surprise, only a few pieces of vegetables remain on Noel's plate. Rain, with an assertive tone, declares that the meat is gone. Elle, stuttering nervously, asked if Noel was satisfied. The response is a resounding no, accompanied by a table slam. Noel demands more meat loudly and insistently, but before he can escalate, a frying pan meets his head once again. Rain scolds him, advising that if he wants more meat, he should ask politely. Clearing his throat, Noel, somewhat conceited, states that Elle has passed his test. Among all the Wuba dishes he had tasted, Elle's was the best. The contract is sealed, granting Elle access to the finest meat from the Laverne Empire for his shop. Elle chuckles with satisfaction, and Rain is glad that her husband has finally acknowledged Elle's culinary skills. The deal is sealed with a handshake, and Elle secures a reliable source of meat, ensuring a stable supply for his business. Noel, satisfied with the meal, orders another serving, marking what Elle considers a successful first day of business. Upstairs in a bedroom on the second floor, a black-haired girl stirs awake. The enticing aroma of delicious food flowing up from downstairs has roused her from sleep. It's evening in Drake City. The suburb embraces a tranquil atmosphere. Elle, the owner of a recently opened restaurant, has smoothly settled into the rhythm of his new culinary venture. A week has passed since the restaurant's inauguration, and the warm reception from the customers fuels Elle's satisfaction. As the evening progresses, a polite customer places an order for 2 additional servings of the Wuba pork belly. With a cheerful smile, Elle happily fulfills the request. The plates are swiftly cleared and the leaving customers express their gratitude, praising Elle's culinary skills. A content smile crosses Elle's face as he bids them farewell, inviting them to return. With the day winding down, Elle, while wiping his hands clean, wonders if he should close up the shop. He notices that his condiments and spices, vital ingredients for flavorful dishes, are about to finish. Elle understands the significance of these elements in cooking, and a tinge of concern crosses his mind as he realizes pepper and other spices are running low as well. Yet, in this world, such spices and condiments are rare commodities not to be used freely. The quality and variety of these culinary essentials in his new world pale in comparison to the modern world he once knew. Restocking becomes a necessity for Elle, and he carefully picks up a gold coin, placing it at the center of a magical circle as he utters some magical words. Energy and light radiate from the magic circle, putting up a mysterious spectacle in the quiet corner of Drake City. Tackling all his problems at once, Elle stumbles upon the magic of summoning from another world. This magical trick can fetch items from the world he originally came from, like the special spices and condiments he needs for his cooking. The summoning magic, when completed, would make these things appear out of thin air. Elle discovers the summoning magic quite by accident while trying to figure out a way to return to his world. Wiping his forehead after using the summoning magic, he points out that this magic has its rules, with limits on the size and quantity of things he can summon. Despite its limitations, the magic is a big help, but it couldn't take him back to his world. Elle feels guilty about taking things, even though he exchanges them for a gold coin. A quirk of the magic was that groceries, unless processed, would arrive spoiled. The summoning left Elle feeling weak, and he struggled to get used to that sensation. Even as an Archmage, he could only pull off this summoning trick once a day. While tidying up, Elle decides it is the perfect time to take a break, drinking a beer he summoned last time. However, when he opens his fridge, all he finds is an empty box, surprising him. Wondering where his beer went, he couldn't hold back his anger. His voice echoes up to the second floor, calling for Rurin, who is peacefully asleep with empty beer cans around her. She chuckles in her sleep, seemingly tickled by Elle in her dreams. A sudden cry pierces the tranquility as Rurin, rubbing her head, accuses Elle of hitting her for no reason. Holding an empty beer can with an annoyed expression, Elle counters her claim, explaining that she had consumed all the beer without asking and that he simply wants her to clean up after herself. Rurin retorts, asserting that Elle deserves it for not leaving her any food from the last time. Proudly declaring her dragon lineage, she claims that cleaning is beneath her, a task meant for lower beings. Elle's frustration reaches new heights, and he delivers another not-so-gentle tap to Rurin's head. He then instructs her to peel and organize the onions. Rurin, still teary-eyed from the earlier bump, insists on being a dragon and cries while tackling the onion-peeling task. As Elle observes Rurin, he reflects on her true nature as a dragon currently polymorphed into a human form. He had found her during the aftermath of the Dragon War when she became an orphan, losing her mother and home. Unable to leave her alone, Elle had extended a helping hand to Rurin, and they had been companions ever since. Despite Rurin's age of over a century, she remains a young dragon, perhaps explaining her occasional immaturity. Now, with tears streaming down her face from the onions, Elle sighs. He promises Rurin a delicious hamburger steak for dinner if she finishes peeling and puts an end to her complaints. Rurin's eyes sparkle with anticipation as she eagerly holds Elle to his promise. From the door swinging open, Elle's attention shifts from the kitchen to the entrance where Mr. Knoll walks in. Setting aside his kitchen duties, Elle greets him, who settles comfortably into his seat and promptly orders some alcohol and snacks. Relieved to see it was just Mr. Knoll, Elle assures him he'd whip up his order shortly. Realizing they are out of beer, Elle decides to offer a different kind of alcohol, which is soju. Grateful for a bottle he had summoned last time, he contemplates whether to change its container. Soon, a plate adorned with meat pieces and a bottle of alcohol finds its way to Knoll's table. Expecting a beer, Knoll is taken aback as he questions Elle about the liquid in the bottle, wondering if it is water. Elle assures him it isn't and encourages him to take a curious sip, introducing the alcohol as soju. Elle watches as Knoll, with a hint of skepticism, pours a cup and takes a sip. As Knoll savors the flavors while using a fork to nibble on the meat, Elle observes with satisfaction. To Elle's delight, Knoll enjoys the unconventional drink and snack pairing. Knoll describes the soju as initially bitter but ending with a sweet note that complements the meat perfectly. The side dish, now elevated with soju, possesses a unique charm, distinct from a salad he had eaten last time. Impressed, Knoll acknowledges Elle's extraordinary cooking skills and expresses his admiration by requesting another bottle of alcohol. Elle gladly complies with Knoll's request for another round, but amidst the pleasant exchange, he can't help but notice a subtle change in his behavior. A thought crosses Elle's mind. Has something happened to Knoll? As time slips away at the table filled with empty alcohol bottles, Knoll signals for another round. Concern etches across Elle's face. He warns Knoll about excessive drinking, emphasizing the high alcohol content of the beverage. Ignoring the caution, Knoll, with a red face, insists on another bottle, expressing the desire to drown his sorrows in alcohol. Worried, Elle presses Knoll for an explanation of what has happened to result in such a drinking spree. Knoll, with a gloomy tone, utters his wife's name, Rain. He harbors suspicion that Rain might be unfaithful. Taken aback, Elle listens intently as Knoll begins recounting the unsettling events. Rain would frequently dress up and leave, claiming it was for a short while. This has become a recurring pattern, and troubled by suspicion, Knoll decided to follow her one day. His body trembling with anxiety as Knoll continued his narrative, his fist colliding with the table, revealing the heart-wrenching truth. Rain, it seemed, was meeting a man from her past, a comrade from her mercenary days. This man, once a close friend of Knoll, had vanished when Knoll opened his butcher shop. Now, it appears he was probably hanging out with Rain, perhaps too ashamed to face Knoll. The distressing revelation deepens as Knoll discloses that Rain had gone out again, even outside the usual monthly patterns. With a shaking fist, Knoll grapples with the belief that his wife no longer cares for him. Elle, absorbing the weight of Knoll's pain, could only listen as the tale of heartbreak unfolded. Elle extends a comforting hand to Knoll, urging him to take a moment and gather his emotions. Elle emphasizes that drowning sorrows in alcohol wouldn't solve the underlying problems. In a rushed response, Knoll admits his struggle to face reality without the numbing effects of alcohol. He chuckles ironically, confessing that despite the heartache, he still loves Rain deeply. The weight of the situation brought Knoll to tears. He bites his trembling lips, unable to face life without Rain. In desperation, Knoll turned to Elle for guidance. With a steadying tone, Elle suggests leaving the matter in his hands. Puzzled, Knoll questions Elle, acknowledging that he hadn't known Rain for long. Elle offers reassurance, sharing his belief that Rain might not be the type to cheat, asking Knoll for patience. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Rurin continues peeling onions, tears streaming down her cheeks. In frustration, she mumbles that Elle is an idiot. Dressed in his mage outfit, Elle enters the kitchen and calls for Rurin to stop the onion peeling. Curious, Rurin inquires why, and Elle mentions that there is a task at hand. Despite initial reluctance, Rurin agrees to accompany him. As the night takes on a festive air, the town bustles with activity. Elle and Rurin find themselves on a rooftop, observing a lively restaurant. Rurin innocently remarks on the crowded scene in other restaurants, unknowingly hurting Elle's feelings. He points out the general vicinity where Rain might be. Scanning the restaurants, Elle spots Rain accompanied by a man, and a realization strikes him. This might be the colleague Knoll mentioned earlier. Elle, with a suspicious gaze, calls Rurin over and discreetly points towards Rain and the man busy in conversation at a corner table. He entrusts Rurin with a peculiar task, to eavesdrop on their exchange. Rurin, always willing to strike a deal, negotiates with Elle. In return for her cooperation, he promises her a serving of his delicious hamburger steak and vows not to demand any additional ingredients for his culinary ventures. Elle, a man of his word, guarantees 2 hamburgers if she agrees. Rurin, nodding in compliance, sealed the agreement. As Rurin turns her attention to the unfolding conversation between Rain and the man named Mint, she overhears Rain's inquiry about whether they should disclose their association to her husband, Mr. Noel. The mention of Noel reveals an underlying concern. He seems troubled and suspicious due to Mint not visiting the butcher shop. Mint, in response, offers a perspective on Noel's personality. He suggests that if Noel discovers that he had helped the shop with money after Noel got scammed before, it would be Noel avoiding him, not the other way around. Elle, absorbing the snippets of conversation, couldn't help but contemplate the dynamics at play. Turning to Rurin, he seeks confirmation of the authenticity of what she has heard. Reassured by Rurin, Elle finds himself deep in thought, realizing that the unfolding narrative isn't merely a love affair, but a tale of intricate connections and unspoken bonds. Elle gracefully descends from the rooftop, signaling the end of Rurin's eavesdropping mission. With a confident air, he announces that there's no need to listen any longer. Rurin, left in the aftermath of Elle's departure, seeks guidance on her next steps. Elle, in response, suggests that she simply head home for the time being. Meanwhile, inside the restaurant, Rain engages in a conversation with Mint, expressing her frustration at the unfairness of her husband's misconceptions. In strides, Elle casually enters the scene and asks if he can join their discussion. Without hesitation, he aligns himself with Rain's sentiments, agreeing that Noel has gravely misunderstood their connection. Noel, in a drunken state still fixated on thoughts of his wife, witnesses the door swinging open at Elle's restaurant as Rain and Mint enter. An uncomfortable tension hangs in the air as Mint, slightly hesitant, greets Noel after a prolonged absence. Anger courses through Noel as he observes the seemingly close pair before him. Rain attempts to defend their relationship, insisting that they are victims of misunderstanding, but Noel remains unconvinced. In his frustration, Noel questions why, out of all people, it had to be Mint, someone he had trusted. In a fit of rage, Noel leaps towards Mint, his clenched fist ready to deliver a punch, accompanied by a furious cry calling Mint a bastard. The collision is halted by an unexpected magical shield that materializes, creating a protective barrier between Noel's fist and Ment's face. The wind stirs as the shield repels the force of the punch. Mint, bewildered by the sudden intervention, finds himself spared from Noel's wrath. Rain, too, is puzzled, but recognizes the shield as a product of magic. The unexpected turn of events leaves the trio in a momentary standstill. Elle quietly approaches from behind, calling out to Mint. He urges Mint to settle the misunderstanding rather than resorting to physical confrontation. With a basket filled with meat and vegetables, Elle asserts that violence won't solve the problem. He reveals that if Noel knew that it was Mint who provided the money for him to start his butcher shop, the situation might be diffused. Noel, caught off guard by the unfolding revelations, turns to Elle seeking an explanation. Elle, adopting a peacemaker stance, invites them to sit down and talk as he begins to prepare some food. Reflecting that a heartfelt conversation might be the key to resolving their issues, Elle arranges all the ingredients with care. Contemplating the healing power of a warm meal and considering Noel's day-long drinking spree, he decides on preparing shabu shabu, a comforting dish. Drawing from Rain's gift of Bellerin meat, he skillfully cooks up a variety of sauces, infusing them with the flavors of soy sauce, carefully strained anchovies, and a touch of MSG. In a brief span, the shabu shabu is ready, and Elle wipes his hands clean, hopeful that the conflict outside has stopped. As they gather around the table, Noel confronts Rain, struggling to grasp the reality that Mint was the benefactor behind his butcher shop venture. Rain, taking a deep breath, confirms the truth. She explains that after Noel fell victim to a scam and was left penniless, Mint came to their aid, offering the financial support needed to open the shop. The revelation hangs in the air, urging the trio to navigate through the complexities of gratitude, misunderstanding, and the bonds that tie them together. In the quiet rhythm of their butcher shop's newfound success, Rain diligently met with Mint every month, slowly repaying the debt that had jump-started Noel's business. The revelation hits Noel like a sudden storm. He couldn't face the truth as he fired back, questioning if the money came from the Lord's castle, repaying him for the scam. He turns to his wife, grappling with the possibility that everything is a lie. Mint, grappling with the weight of his actions, poses a question to Noel if he would have accepted the money if he knew it came from Mint. An apology followed, explaining that he couldn't be present on the shop's opening day, fearing it would seem like deception. Mint, oblivious to Noel's struggles, never imagined the depth of his friend's difficulties. Noel, in turn, had assumed Mint was saving up money for a peaceful retirement as a mercenary. The conversation hangs in the air as Elle, the mediator, arrives with a spread of food. Apologizing, he offered his advice, emphasizing that the vegetables shouldn't be boiled for too long or they might get overcooked, encouraging them to enjoy the meal while conversing. As Elle served, Mint, puzzled by the thinness of the meat, inquired about it. Elle clarifies that the Bellerin meat from Noel's shop is sliced thin for the dish, a soup where the meat is cooked directly in the broth. Amidst Elle's culinary guidance, Ment gets a serving of the soup. Pleased with the flavors, he laughs and urges Noel to try. Hesitant, Noel takes a sip only to be pleasantly surprised by the taste. Ment stirs up some old memories, asking Noel if he recalls the Perun battle. The recollection brings forward a vivid image of Noel sacrificing himself, taking a sword for Ment. The battle had lingered longer than expected, leaving them with a shortage of supplies and a watery soup as their sustenance. Ment recounts the day he managed to catch a wild Bellerin, only to collapse near Noel upon entering their tent. The soup crafted from the Bellerin was plain, the meat tough and pungent, yet, at that moment, it surpassed any other option they had. As Ment revisits these memories, he paints a picture of a shared past marked by sacrifice and sustenance. Noel, visibly moved, trembles as he responds to Ment. Ment echoes Noel's earlier question, reflecting on why he helped despite saving up for retirement. His revelation was simple. He had no grand plans. Helping his friend takes priority. Tears stream down Noel's face, hands shaking as he holds the soup bowl, apologizing with a stutter. Elle, witnessing this emotional exchange, expresses his satisfaction with the resolution. Ment, taking a sip of the soup, finds it heartwarming. In that shared bowl of soup, unspoken emotions are exchanged, and the wounds of misunderstanding begin to heal. In the background, Rurin interjects with a passionate outburst, pointing out to Elle the absolute nature of a promise to a dragon and criticizing him for not keeping his promise. Elle found himself in a perplexing situation, scratching his head. With a reassuring tone, he suggests that there is still time to whip up some hamburger steak for Rurin right away. However, Rurin, her patience wearing thin, points out that it was already late into the night. She questions how Elle could dismiss her request when all she wanted was for him to fulfill his part of the contract. Amidst this exchange, Ment comes to meet Elle in the kitchen. Swiftly, Elle covers Rurin's mouth to stop her protests and casually informs Ment that he hopes they enjoyed the food. In response, Ment acknowledges the delightful meal, but directs to the reason for his visit. Ment discloses that his mercenary group has received a mission to escort someone important, and they wish to organize a dinner before embarking on their journey. He seeks Elle's agreement to host this celebratory gathering at his restaurant. Caught off guard by the unexpected request, Elle's surprise is evident. Contemplating the prospect of a group dinner for mercenaries, he weighs the unusual request. Palenku is a unique bird in this world, and is distinct from regular chickens due to its frequent changes in habitat, making it a rare and highly valued meat. Elle is frustrated by the difficulty of catching Palenku and considers burning the forest to obtain the prized meat for the mercenaries' dinner. When he asks Noel about Palenku meat, he is surprised, as acquiring it would be like finding a gold mine. Disappointed that Noel doesn't have any, Elle questions Noel's lost confidence, and Noel, feeling a pang of guilt, recalls hearing about Palenku sighting in the lemon forest. Driven by this lead, Elle heads to the lemon forest, but finds catching a Palenku to be a difficult task due to fatigue. Eventually, he gives up and delegates the task to Rurin, who agrees after securing a promise from Elle to wash the dishes. Rurin releases a powerful black aura to scare and then uses a dragon roar to strike a Palenku unconscious, earning Elle's gratitude. Elle humorously compares his fate to that of the Palenku, having already consumed a dragon's heart. He tasks Rurin with catching 15 more Palenku. Returning from their hunt, they find satisfaction in their successful expedition. Rurin, though irritable, enjoys a beer after work, making Elle caution against excessive drinking. As night falls, the restaurant fills with mercenaries who initially doubt the place's capacity. However, Ment confidently assures them of the exceptional taste. A sudden declaration from a young mercenary named Miltine catches everyone's attention as he claims to believe in the quality of the food. Miltine, confident in his recommendation, vouches for the restaurant based on Ment's endorsement. However, his colleagues were skeptical, knowing Miltine tended to praise everything Ment said. Miltine, annoyed by their doubt, laughs it off. Ment intervenes, urging them to stop chatting as the food is arriving. Shortly after, El appears with the dishes, and Ment apologizes for the noise. Understanding it was a celebration, El welcomes them. Ment introduces Miltine, who expresses high expectations due to Ment's praises. El hopes the dish will live up to the expectations and serves them the dish. Miltine is shocked to learn it is Palenku, a beast even professional hunters struggled to catch. El, confused by Miltane's reaction, invites them to taste it. Amazed by the extraordinary flavor, they praise El's cooking and declare the restaurant the best. Miltane, enjoying the dish, is warned not to eat it all. El, happy with their response, promises to bring dishes to other tables, but faces a challenge due to the high number of customers. He reluctantly asks Rurin for help. Rurin, initially reluctant, faces El's frustration for her attitude. In an uncharacteristic tone, El mentions their plan to open a restaurant together after the war, recalling their initial agreement. Feeling a change in the atmosphere, El suggests Rurin return to her lair. Confused, Rurin agrees to help, changing her mind. With Rurin's assistance, Elle's workload lightens, ensuring a smoother operation. After completing the tasks, a tired Rurin receives praise from Elle, who invites her to join him for a meal and beer. While enjoying the palanku meat, Rurin compliments Elle's delicious cooking. Elle, surprised and pleased, notices that the restaurant is looking clean. When all the customers left, Rurin cleaned up the whole restaurant. Elle asks if Rurin has become a bit more mature. Rurin attributes it to the place being their restaurant, leaning her head on Elle's shoulder with a smile. Amid the peaceful atmosphere, Elle seizes the moment to take out the topic of forgetting their bet of cleaning the dishes for a month while capturing the elusive palanku. However, Rurin disagrees. Suddenly, Rurin's behavior changes as she notices a mysterious figure outside the restaurant, making her alert. Surprised by Rurin's sudden shift, Elle soon understands when he sees the person entering, the Black Dragon Elder, Metadonna. Metadonna expresses displeasure at visiting the human city, remarking that it always feels unpleasant. Elle recognizes the imposing dragon and inquires about his purpose for being there. Metadonna, not immediately answering, shares that Elle has been living quite comfortably with a dragon in this small place. Turning his attention to Rurin, he asks if she feels uncomfortable. Rurin assures that she didn't, leading Elle to ask if she was the reason for Metadonna's visit. Knowing that no one opposes him about Rurin unless there is an argument, Metadonna confirms that Rurin is indeed the reason for his visit. However, Rurin asserts that she had chosen to stay with Elle even after he abandoned her. Metadonna expresses concern about Rurin's attitude, clarifying that he didn't abandon her, he simply arrived late. Elle interrupts, emphasizing the importance of the promise made. Dragons highly valued promises, and Metadonna acknowledges this, stating that he came to discuss the promise they made regarding Rurin. They had promised to entrust Rurin to him, but there is a hierarchy in the promise. The one who makes the promise holds priority. Elle inquires about the nature of this first promise. In the Black Dragon clan, dragons are considered adults upon reaching the age of 800. However, a dragon without its lair by that age becomes a ward and has to leave for the sacred lands. Rurin had been utilizing her mother's lair, which was unfortunately destroyed in the last war. As per the clan rule, when Rurin turns 800 next year, she must leave for the sacred lands. Breaking this rule is considered an act of war, but Elle remains unfazed. He confidently declares that he will carry out what he mentioned earlier, shocking Metadonna, who looks visibly angered. Elle, however, isn't intimidated, even though Rurin is feeling anxious. Rurin anxiously intervenes, preventing Elle from potentially starting a war. Despite her concerns, Elle seemed confused, as his intention was not to initiate a conflict. Instead, he clarifies that he meant to build a dragon lair. Metadonna, still puzzled, shows his anger at Elle's attitude. Although Elle had consumed a dragon's heart, he shouldn't be underestimating other dragons. Rurin stops Elle from escalating the situation, but Elle's true intention is revealed. Since they have 1 year before Rurin has to leave, Elle proposes building a dragon's lair within that time frame. He suggests that with enough time and resources, they can accumulate treasures and begin the construction. Metadonna couldn't comprehend the sudden shift, thinking the problem had already been resolved. He leaves, stating he will return next year. Elle invites him, and the construction of the dragon's lair begins. A dragon's lair, essentially a luxurious cave filled with treasures, symbolizes a dragon's residence. Though customers kept coming to the restaurant due to rumors about serving palanku, Elle faced challenges due to the high number of customers. In a different scene, Noel is surprised in a forest, encountering several palanku perching on a tree. Elle explains his plan to supply palanku to Noel and become the exclusive butcher shop selling palanku meat in the Empire, attracting numerous customers. Noel, astonished, inquires about catching them, to which Elle assures him not to worry, as Ment's mercenary group had already tasted some. Elle offers the palanku meat for free, intending to split the proceeds equally. Noel is surprised, questioning why Elle did the work of catching the palanku and why he would take only 50%. Elle casually dismisses Noel's concerns about taking only half of the sales, stating it isn't much profit anyway, and Noel could use the opportunity to sell other meats and buy his wife nice clothes. Although annoyed, Noel agrees to sell the palanku meat to Elle. However, Noel remains puzzled about how Elle managed to catch palanku, given their constant movement. His confusion turns into shock when he witnesses Elle casting a spell, erecting a giant barrier that covers the entire forest. Elle marvels at Elle's magical prowess, realizing it surpasses the abilities of someone who had only studied magic for a few years. Curious about Elle's true identity, Noel questions him, but Elle only claims to be a restaurant owner who retired from the army after the war, urging Noel to keep his magic usage a secret. Elle assures Noel that his plan will run smoothly the next day, with the barrier in place. The following day, looking at his empty restaurant, Elle laughs happily, relieved that no customers came. Rurin, however, questions if this is truly something to be happy about. Elle acknowledges the truth, admitting he hoped for at least 1 or 2 customers, but the lack of customers provided them with time to build Rurin's lair. Rurin asks if Elle will stay with her once the lair is finished, but Elle declines, planning to stay at the restaurant. Upset, Rurin suggests declaring war against the Black Dragon clan, but Elle calms her, assuring they would build her lair nearby. Despite her uncertainty, Elle urges Rurin not to worry and follow him. Elle's destination was the hill below his restaurant, as all the land there belonged to him. Rurin was content with the proximity of her lair, but notes the need for stabilizing barriers during construction to avoid damaging the restaurant. Elle asks Rurin to start digging, but he eventually decides to return to the restaurant, not willing to leave it empty for too long. Rurin is left speechless by Elle's decision to return to the restaurant, while Elle is shown enjoying the freedom of being alone in the sunshine after a long time. However, his solitude is short-lived when a young boy suddenly enters the restaurant. The young boy inquires if it is a famous restaurant, and Elle, while greeting him, downplays the fame, confirming that it is indeed a restaurant. The young boy has heard about the legendary palanku being served here, but Elle apologizes, explaining that they no longer sell it and suggests he visit Noel's butcher shop. Unwilling to do so, the young boy asks if there is anything else to eat. Elle, willing to accommodate any customer, invites him to sit and wait. Elle observes that the young boy seems like a noble boy, facing difficult circumstances. Although the restaurant didn't discriminate against customers, the only dish tailored to children's tastes is hamburgers, made with woka meat as a patty. Elle would mash the meat, add a little salt, bake it with bread, place the patty on top of vegetables, pour the exquisite sauce with onions, and finally add eggs obtained from hunting palankas. Despite not selling palanku, Elle has a different approach to the eggs, creating a hamburger fit even for a dragon. Serving the dish to the young boy, Elle explains that it was similar to a sandwich. The young boy, about to taste it, is interrupted by someone who appears to be his servant, accompanied by guards. The young boy's face turns pale as the servant reveals that they have been searching for him everywhere. Panicking, the servant questions why the young boy is in such a place. Annoyed by the servant's interference, Elle expresses his frustration, but the servant, now realizing Elle's ownership of the restaurant, inquires if Elle knows the identity of the person he just served. The young boy is the heir to the Great City Baron. Ignorant of this fact, Elle questions the problem, emphasizing that regardless of status, he serves food to all customers. The servant expresses annoyance at Elle's presumptuous attitude, while the boy is trying to defuse the situation and does his best to break up the dispute. Recognizing the tense atmosphere, the boy, also known as Diaren, decides to leave with his servant, ensuring to pay for his meal and apologizing for having Elle prepare the food without him eating it. Observing Diaren walking listlessly out of the restaurant, Elle grows more worried. After a while, Rurin arrives and informs Elle that they should take turns digging the hole since she admits she isn't strong enough and her hands hurt from digging alone. Elle, in his usual blunt manner, told her to stop whining and promised to dig the next day, as they had somewhere to go. Curious, Rurin asks where they are heading, expressing her hunger. Elle explains that they were going to the Lord's castle. Inside the castle, Diaren is seen lost in his thoughts, and he is surprised when a blue portal suddenly appears behind him, revealing Elle and Rurin carrying the ordered hamburger. Diaren, shocked by their sudden arrival and Elle's use of magic, is handed the parcel containing the warmed-up hamburger. Elle tells him to taste it, and Diaren eagerly prepares to do so. Although he has many questions, he decides to eat first. However, someone interrupts by knocking on the door of Diaren's room. Concerned, Diaren assures the person outside that everything is okay, but Elle is frustrated by the thought that they didn't even let Diaren enjoy his hamburger. In the next scene, we see that now Diaren is scared that what will happen now. Elle commands that he is the Lord's heir and baron, and they cannot refuse his orders, so be confident and say it was nothing. Diaren replies that they have never listened before and always ignored what he says. The knocking on the door gets more intense as we hear that Butler wants to come in. Rurin thinks how frustrating this is, and she screams it was nothing, so leave, and Diaren never ordered to come in. Everyone goes silent, even he person behind the door. Diaren realizes that she screamed in his voice instead of her own and thinks that they still won't listen to his orders. Person behind the door replies that he understands his orders and asks Diaren to call him if he needs anything. Diaren is put to shock when he hears what Butler said, and Rurin is angered that how pathetic this was. Ellison explains that he is a very superior person and he just have to establish his superiority himself. When suddenly Diaren kneels down to Ellison as he wants to make Ellison to be his teacher, Diaren is put to a confusion. Diaren explained that his mother passed away after giving birth to him and his father remarried shortly after, so he spent most of his time with his stepmother. His stepmother was a strict person and she told him to be careful of how he acts since he was a lord's son. Despite all of that, he still loved her and there were some good times as well. However, everything changed when his father became bedridden due to an illness and his stepmother never looked at him or talked directly to him at dinners or celebrations. Diaren further explains that he wanted to become a good lord, just like his father, but the servants tried to restrict his movements under his stepmother's orders. There was no one to talk to him, and everyone was ignoring him all the time. Since when it became like this, he thought he wouldn't be treated any better even if he inherited the title of a lord. Dairon's eyes light up as his thoughts are changed after today's events, and wants Ellison to teach him more ways to become a good lord. El is put to confusion as he states that he is just a restaurant owner, and Diran's this conclusion is a bit weird. Dairon explains that this has happened never before and that person would have entered if he had told him to leave. It is obvious that Diran lacks a lot of confidence, and it seems like he purposely suppressed his energetic and active personality. He tries to make him confident by explaining things like to look into the other's eyes when talking, and also explains that if he wants to be a good lord, the lord's position comes with taking responsibilities, and he should be able to take the responsibility of every word he says. El further explains that he doesn't mean that he should ignore other people's word and teaches him that he should listen to them and make sure to think about them before making a decision he truly believes in. If the decision is his favor, then all is well. If not, then accept it and take the responsibilities. In El's opinion, that's what makes a good lord. Diran is just confused and shocked that being a good lord is a big responsibility. Anyways, it's about time that they leave. So, Elsion asks Dairon to eat the food before it gets cold and wants Dairon to visit him in restaurant soon. Dairon states that he is feeling dreamy and takes a bit of his burger. It seems that the burger is very tasty and delicious. When suddenly he realizes that a good lord means a person who makes an effort to ensure that everyone can enjoy this type of food. And of course, better food is quals to better life. Finally, he understands the actual meaning of being a good lord. The scene changes to El and Rurin coming out of the portal in front of restaurant, where Ellison is hoping that Rurin doesn't take Dairon's words too seriously. To which Rurin asks, why did he put so much effort into explaining him? And it seems like he cares a lot. Ellison, extending his arm with gold coin, explains that he did this as he got payment more than what the burger costed, and further explains that this coin is valued at around 100,000 runes. Rurin is a bit confused and knows that a regular hamburger costs 200 runes, so she asks if Dairon really gave him the coin in exchange of the burger. It turns out El did all this, so it can fulfill the price because it's not a rip-off restaurant. Dairon has hands as big as a dragon, and Ellison hopes that he becomes a regular later on, but Rurin, opposing Ellison, expresses that she doesn't like this because she will have fewer hamburgers to eat. The scene changes to a forest located on the outskirts of Grake City where there is an oddly popular clinic. The doctor there is definitely skilled and even learned healing magic, but that isn't the reason for its popularity. The biggest reason why customers flock to this place far from downtown is that it is run by an elf named Elena. We see Mrs. Rain having a severe burn, and that gets completely healed in a blink of the eye with the help of magic. Elena expresses that she is glad that Rain arrived quickly, as if the burn was left untreated, scars may have formed, and the burn should be fine now. Rain thanks Elena and expresses that her skills are the best. But Rain notices that Elena is not looking so good, and asks if there is any problem, to which Elena replies that she has been thinking of going back to her hometown now. Mrs. Rain asks that why does she wants to leave. Elena expresses that she loves healing and helping people, so despite everyone's opposition, she came out. But the reality was different. People come to her not for treatment but want to meet the elf woman at all costs, rather than doctor, as her. As she expresses this, we see people peeking through the window. She further explains that not too long ago, a lady came to her and was furious, saying that she had seduced her husband. Elena was put to shock as she didn't ever do this. Elena further explains that she knows that not all humans are like that, and it's not that she doesn't like healing people, but it is getting difficult to her to hold it in and keep going. Rain asks that if she doesn't like her too, but Elena likes her. Rather, Rain has always treated her well, and that's why she put up with this without prejudice. Rain wants to confirm that if there were more things that Elena liked here, that she would still stay. But instead of replying, Elena is confused what to say. Rain explains that there is so many things she doesn't like about her husband either. For example, his snoring also, he is so naive, but there is something she likes more, like the fact he is dependable, looks out only for her, and does his best in everything he does. Rain also asks that if she said that it still feels good to treat people with Elena, replying yes. She recommends the restaurant that is located at the side of the hill and wants Elena to try eating there tonight. But Elena is not sure why Rain will recommend a restaurant. Rain tries to explain that the number of reasons for this place can keep increasing one by one. Scene changes to Creston with his nephew coming up to Ellison. Creston is not sure what El is doing here as he was going to the restaurant. El says he was also about to go to the restaurant as he was constructing the lair for too long and asks, who is this person? Creston explains that he was his nephew, and he said that he had something to discuss. So Creston wanted to listen while eating some wooba meat and asks if there is anyone at the restaurant right now. El replies that Rurin should be there and asks what the matter is. Creston explains that there is a clinic run by an elf, and Rain has recommended Elle's restaurant to the doctor there, and Creston thinks that they should be there by now. Now Elle is hurried, and heads back to the restaurant with the boys. In the way, Ellison expresses that an elf is unique, and states that elves don't come out of the forest and asks that they must be popular. To which, Creston in an annoyed manner replies that he heard that all the guys in the neighborhood run there even for a thorn pricking their finger, which is very pathetic. He further explains that seeing things like this makes him understand why elves hate humans. Ellison is not too sure about this statement, as he thinks that there are some elves who aren't like that, and Creston shouldn't be prejudiced, and says that he admits that elves are a proud race. As he enters, he sees Elena on the ground kneeling down, saying that Rurin is a great being, and wants forgiveness for her rudeness. Rurin asks if Elena knows she was rude and will forgive her if she lives the rest of her life as her subordinate. Ellison is very angered with this treatment of his guests. Rurin, when she notices the presence of Ellison, says that she got herself an elf subordinate that she can use. Ellison screams in anger what she is doing to their customer as Creston and his nephew wait outside. We see Rurin lying down on the table when she notices a customer is here. Elena asks if this was the restaurant ran by Ellison. Rurin replies yes, but Ellison isn't here right now, and realizes that Elena is an elf when Elena takes her cap off. As expectations to Rurin, all elves are beautiful, and Elena is one of them too. Elena, in a reply to the compliment, says that Rurin is beautiful too, and she looks younger than Elena herself. Rurin, with a big smile on her face, asks if Elena is saying that she looks younger to her, and explains that she might look young by the standards of her race, but she is not younger than Elena while letting her dragon aura come out of her body. Rurin is now in an angry form and screams that who Elena is talking to like that. Elena is put to a shock as she kneels down and says sorry. This is when suddenly Ellison and others come in. Ellison see the customer down on her knees in front of Rurin, which makes Ellison very mad. We hear a loud bang from inside, and Rurin crying in pain. We see the door has opened, and Ellison invites Creston and his nephew inside as he asks for forgiveness, because there was a bit of commotion. In the next scene, we see a wound on Rurin's head, obviously made by Ellison hitting her, that made her cry. Elena realizes that Rurin is definitely a dragon, and if she was dreaming, this is because it's common knowledge known to everyone from children to the elderly to never go against a dragon. Dragons are a walking natural disaster, the strongest race, the pinnacle of life capable of annihilating a village on a whim. Elena grown up hearing countless legends about such dragons. Elena wonders who Ellison actually is as he treats a dragon like a child. We see Ellison scolding Rurin and commands her to dig out the cave. Elena is brought back to real world with Ellison coming up to her and apologizing about what happened. Ellison explains that he didn't expect such an incident to happen while he was away. But Elena is still a bit scared and asks if Ellison is a human or not. Ellison replies that he is a human and not a monster. It seems that Rurin didn't even try to hide her presence as a dragon. Ellison goes near to Elena's ear and explains that yes, Rurin is a dragon, and asks Elena if she can keep this a secret from others. Elena is still scared from the incident and replies that she can keep it a secret as she has no intention of interfering with a dragon, and explains that she doesn't want to die yet. Ellison thinks that his first impression is bad as Elena thinks that he will kill her. Ellison asks who elf council member recommended by Rain was, and it turns out to be Elena, as we know. Hearing this makes Ellison think that his first impression is ruined even more. Elena confirms that with the ingredients here, Ellison can make delicious dishes. Ellison takes the order, which was anything without meat, as Elena clearly stated that she cannot digest meat in her body, and it was not about the belief. Also, Creston and his nephew in back order grilled uba belly fat. Ellison decides to make tomato pasta for Elena. Firstly, he fries diced onions, garlic, and mushrooms in a pan with olive oil. The mixture of these elements creates a delicious smell. Then he grinds the main ingredient, tomatoes, and strains them and pours them into the pan. At this time, he seasons with salt and sugar, adds various spices, and then simmer the tomato sauce on low heat to prevent it from burning. While evaporating the moisture from sauce, he prepares the pasta by boiling it for 8 minutes and saves the pasta water for later. Finally, he mixes the pasta and sauce, adds the pasta water to adjust the thickness of the sauce, and finally the tomato pasta is complete. He serves the dish to Elena, who is surprised to see such a delicious-looking dish. Ellison instructs Elena to eat it with a fork and also states that there are no meat products. Elena is surprised by the beautiful color of pasta, and she eats the food. In the next scene, we see that uba belly fat is ready and is served to the customers. Ellison asks Creston for how long he was waiting too, which Creston explains that he thought his neck would break while he was waiting. He asks Nellin, Creston's nephew, to try it as he seems sad, when suddenly Ellison notices Elena eating pasta while screaming that it is very delicious. She also screams that she has been eating raw vegetables only until now, while she was all in tears. After completing, she again screams that it was very tasty and amazing. But she notices that Elle was standing right there, and she is now ashamed of herself. Elle asks that if the pasta was liking to her taste. But Elena was still shamed, and was saying that she couldn't help herself doing that as her face turns red. Elle states that it's good if the dish suits her taste and hands her a handkerchief while doing so. He asks if she usually visit other restaurants or not. Elena explains that in the city she attracts too much attention, so she usually goes to small markets on the outskirts and buy ingredients to eat. It's not like that she never thought of eating proper meals at restaurants, but there weren't many options without meat, and when there were, they tasted bland. She has been wondering if cooking food was even necessary. Elle confirms this statement as he knows that people here don't use much seasoning, and it's quite rare for a restaurant to serve food other than meat, and which is well seasoned and cooked like everyone do here for meat. She explains that coming here changed her perceptions and should thank Rain for suggesting this place. Elle is relieved as he thought his restaurant was going to receive bad rating because of what Rurin did to Elena. We hear a scream from behind when we see Creston standing up in shock. Neelan explains that he found out that her mother isn't her biological mother. The scene changes to a mine where we see an old lady searching for Nellen. She asks a person named Dylan that if he had any uba, to which he replies that he haven't seen them, and the night shift crew has already entered the mine. We see the cheering a bit and wonders if they even ate before working. Old lady asks if she can deliver the basket in her hand and come back, and she goes inside the mine. We are taken back to the restaurant where we see Creston asking where did they hear that story. Nellen, while crying, says that is not what's important, and states that he was deceived for 20 whole years, and explains that he couldn't focus on work and he even left the mine midway. It seems like Elle and Elena are eavesdropping on others' conversation, while they are also talking to each other that this is bad to do, but they are still doing it. Nellen explains that at this rate he doesn't think he can even go home. Creston opposes his claims and reminds Nellen how hard May raised him. He reminds that his father died early as a mercenary, and despite the hardship she worked day and night to feed Nellen well. He explains that doing all this for a child who is not even her biological child, and asks he is dumb enough to not be able to judge that himself, to which Nellen makes sure that he knows he was wrong. He explains that he was confused and left in a rush this morning. His mother reminds that he was leaving behind his lunchbox, to which Nellen in anger replies that he doesn't need it. Ma'am. Creston is very angered by this and lifts him up in the air by his collar, and reminds him that there are things he should and shouldn't say while calling him a brat. Everyone was scared and confused that what was happening. We see Creston ask what Rain meant by the mine collapsed and what happened to Mrs. May. It seems like Rain is not sure, but apparently Mrs. May went inside to find Nellen, and then the mine collapsed. Nellen becomes sad as sweat rolls down his face. He starts running to get to mine as fast as possible, as Creston was also about to leave when Elena asks if she can also come. She explains that she is a doctor, and if a mine collapsed, then there would definitely be people who are injured. Ellison also states that he will also come. Ryan is not too sure with Elena's decision, but she remembers what she said earlier at her clinic. Ellison volunteers to take Elena to the mines. The scene changes, and we see the people trying to rescue the crowd inside when we see Nellen forcing the guards at the door to get out of his way, but guards refuse as they remind him of the dangerous mine that can collapse again. Ellison tries to calm Nellen down, and he assures him that they will save Mrs. May. A guard refuses the idea of them going inside and explains they can't predict when the mine will collapse again, as it was an emergency situation. Elle explains that Elena is a doctor who has been taught healing magic, and there are probably a lot of people inside who can't move and need to be treated right away. Guards finally agree to let them go inside, and he begs to save the crowd stuck inside. We now see that they both have entered the mine, and Elena thanks Ellison for helping, but she didn't want Ellison to follow her inside the mine as it was too dangerous. As soon as they enter the first floor of the mine, some rocks fall on them. Elena tries to cover herself to minimize the damage, but Ellison just creates a shield to protect both of them. Elena is very amazed and wonders if Ellison was a mage, and Ellison replies that he was quite successful when he was younger, but is retired now. He also states that he is very curious why Elena decided to come here. Ellison states that he has heard that Elena owns a clinic in Drake City, and explains that he is telling this as one of his comrades used to be an elf too, and he doesn't think she is running that clinic just because she is an elf, and reminds that there were probably some times when humans behaved rudely to her, and yet she decided to enter a collapsing mine to save people and asks if here is a special reason to do so. Elena doesn't reply and quietly walks when they find that the road ahead is forked, which means it is divided into two. Ellison, knowing that they don't have enough time to search both of them, speaks out some spells, and 4 yellow orbs like thing generate out of thin air. Elena is very shocked that he can do magic and even control spirit. Ellison explains that these spirit orbs will tell him if there are any survivors. In one of the tunnels, a spirit orb finds a miner who hurt his leg while the mine collapsed, and he thinks that he is hallucinating as he saw the orbs and also thinks that his end is near. But Elena and Ellison managed to make it in time, and Elena quickly started to help the miner. Fortunately, that injury is not a serious one, and she explains to the miner that he can heat out after a first aid treatment. Miner is very grateful to Elena. This was when Ellison told her that spirit orbs more people, and they should get going. Elena was finishing the first aid up when more bunch of rocks fall on them, but fortunately Ellison was right there and saved them. Outside the mines, we see injured people flying out as they are treated and sent to safety with the help of Elle's magical powers. Inside, we see that Elena is now very tired. Elle asks if she can keep going, to which, fortunately, she replies yes, and they can keep going. They finally find Nellen's mother, and Elena, without hesitation, starts trying to treat her. Elena explains that Mrs. May is in very bad state and she will have to use stronger recovery spell on her, but she can't guarantee its results. She uses a big spell that spits out green flash and the scene is changed. We are taken to the temporary evacuation shelter, where we see Mrs. Rain sad and questioning that what did they do to receive these times, but Creston tries to calm her down and reminds her that the spell worked and it's not worry too much. We see that Mrs. May is badly injured around her eye and all her clothes are covered in dust. With tears in his eyes, Nellen is constantly waiting when she will wake up. Elle explains that there is no need to worry, and Elena treated her quickly using stronger spells so she's past a critical state. Elena further explains that she may have received a heavy blow to her head, but the treatment was a success and the injury near her eye isn't a serious one, and she will be able to live normally once the bandages are removed. Nellen opens that lid of the basket that was found in May's hands. It turns out that it is the lunch that he rudely refused in the morning. He regrets doing this. Suddenly Mrs. May wakes, and if the person standing near her was Nellen, everyone's mood quickly changes as Mrs. May is finally awake and conscious. Nellen bursts into tears as he approaches his mother and tells that her son is right there. Mrs. May, before her injuries, asks if Nellen was hurt while in tears. Nellen replies that he is fine, and he was so scared. What if the rude words he said in the morning became his last words to her? May is happy that her son called her mom again, as she also starts crying, and she apologizes for making Nellen worry, and states that it is a relief that Nellen was not inside the mines. Elena, after watching this scene, explains that actually she wanted to close the clinic and return to her hometown. She was disappointed in humans after experiencing a lot of terrible things here. That's when Mrs. Rain told her to try to increase the numbers of things she enjoys here. Perhaps it seems that she didn't try to find those things. She realizes that the lives of humans are much shorter compared to an elf's, but they express their emotions freely, and that is why people get easily disappointed and heartbroken, and she was one of them. But ironically, that was also the reason she started her clinic. She thinks that there are too many things she cherishes here that she can't just leave. She likes the honest emotions of humans, and now she also knows how delicious the food here is. While saying that she realized many things today, she started to feel dizzy and was about to fall when Elle caught her and saved her. Elena's face became red when Elle caught her in his hands. Elle says that it seems she exhausted herself and excuses as he uses a spell on her. Elena realizes that it is the elf's mana transfer spell. Ellison says that the elf friend he mentioned of earlier taught him this spell, and his name is Bendon. Elena, when realizes that Bendon is the hero of elves, she is just shocked. When leaving the mine, Elena asks Elle how does he knows the mana transfer spell, but Elle reminds that he already told that he used to be a famous mage. Meanwhile, on the hill beneath the restaurant, Rurin is still digging the tunnel, thinking about Elle, the scoundrel that always leaves her out. Rurin is annoyed by Elle and thinks how can he tell her to dig just because she can't use magic in front of other people, and that is not fair. She was just trying to get a subordinate to help with the restaurant when suddenly a stream of water bursts onto Rurin, drenching her in water. Rurin wonders what this was. Elle confirms that suddenly water came out of the ground, and Rurin wondered where it was coming from and dug and ended up getting water all over the place. Rurin replies positive and replies that is how she got water all over the place. Elle calms himself down and tries to be patient as he knows she doesn't mean to irritate him. Rurin says that she tried digging again and couldn't find it. Elle explains that there must be an underground water source nearby, and digging opened up a waterway. It seems that she dug pretty deeps, but even they use magic. Seeing it from here would be impossible. Elle asks Rurin if she remembers the last time when they talked about, and they need to cover the ceiling with a shield, to which Rurin again replies positive. After asking this, Elle uses some 8th class magic spell called Inferno to seal the ceiling. While he was using the spell, Rurin reminds him that he will have to control his power, if not he will fly off the hill. Elle creates a massive shield, but the water starts bursting inside the shield. He questions himself that Inferno hit the groundwater and is pushing up. He confirms that this definitely is hot spring water. Rurin, in an excited manner, asks Elle to do this again as she needs to clean herself up a bit while taking her clothes off. He tries to stop her from entering the hot water, but it was too late and she entered it already and burned herself. We see that they put a kettle on the stove while they figure this case. Elle reminds Rurin that she can't just oon into things like that, but she tries to defend herself by saying that how was she supposed to know it was hot? He apologizes that he should have told her and create another shield around the stream of water. Rurin wonders what he was doing with the shield and asks him. Elle explains that he wants to create a safe place where he can collect the clean water. He further explains that by pressing down on the ground with the shield, the dirt will naturally settle and create a space to collect clean water, and then he will remove the top of the shield. While explaining, he made a hot water bath in minutes. He throws Rurin saying, "Get in." Rurin, without realizing, starts screaming that the water is hot and she was going to get cooked, but she realizes that it was just a little bit warm. While taking clothes off, Elle explains that he cooled it down to not burn their bodies. Now Elle too enters the pool filled with warm water. He exclaims that the water feels good. Rurin asks Elle where did he go. Elle explains that the mine has collapsed and he went to save the people there. Rurin in anger asks with that female elf and becomes mad on him. Elle tries to calm her down and explains that she was needed as he is not good with healing magic. Rurin, still in anger, says that is the reason he was so happy. Rurin exclaims that she had to dig these holes while he was at the mines and says that that part of her hates elves and other races too. Elle again tries to calm her down by saying that he hates everyone but her. Anyways, he grabs the hot water in the kettle and pours it in a cup. He adds cocoa powder and mixes it all up. He asks Rurin if she would like to have some. Rurin grabs it and asks what this was. Elle replies that this was cocoa, that he brought some along with the towels. Rurin tries it and realizes that it's sweet but delicious. Elle explains that cocoa is made by processing a fruit called cacao, and it looks simple powder, but it takes a lot of growing, fermenting, drying, roasting, pressing, and much more to make this. A lot of people worked hard so they could taste some of it. Elle expresses that he has the power to blow a mine, but even then, he couldn't save a single injured person. He can't even get simple ingredients for the restaurant with Creston. Even if he uses magic to create a large space here, he will eventually have to ask the dwarves to build a lair. While taking a sip of his cocoa, he explains that there may be difference in races, abilities, and personalities, but they shouldn't try to push everyone away because of that. Even a dragon can't take on the world alone. Rurin says that she understands and will treat him differently from the rest, as he is special to her. Elle tries to explain that that's now how it works, but gives up and tells her to take it slow. The scene changes to a time period of war when we see a person commanding someone to hold the position and don't get too close to the cliff's end. It seems that he was commanding young Ellison how to fight. He again commands him to back up as he was too far out while slashing a person who was attacking Elle. Suddenly, a person comes attacking from behind with a large weapon from behind that old man. He manages to stab him with his sword and tries to throw him off the cliff, but it doesn't quite work that way, as evil person take him as well in the cliff. Ellison saw his senior die before his eyes. The scene changes, and we see Elle putting together 2 wooden planks with nails and hammer. Elle closed the restaurant for today. Rurin asks why he closed up the store. Elle explains that they were drinking cocoa the other day, but they had no milk as he used it to marinate meat, and there only so little left over. Because of this, he is going to build a ranch so he can have a constant supply. Rurin gets confused as there is nothing. Elle says that they have to start from scratch. He explains that what they need is called Baraneric, and it's located downstream of Verant River. Elle asks Rurin to teleport to the Barent River, but Rurin can't technically do that as she can only teleport to the places she have been to, and she was able to track Baron Kid because she was tracking the scent that child left behind. Elle tells her to go by feeling, and he will tell her the direction and distance. Rurin exclaims that that is not how you use this skill, and still opens a portal to the point where Elle told. They arrived at the right place, and there are so many Baranerics there, but they seem to forget one thing, that they were high up in the sky, because it seems that the ground is lower here to the ground compared to ground at the restaurant. Rurin asks Elle to do something, but Elle points out that she is a dragon and questions that how can she be afraid of the sky and what happened to her wings. She exclaims that she would rather die falling than releasing her polymorph. While using some spells, Elle asks why does she hates her dragon form so much, but Rurin doesn't want to tell him the reason. They slowly make a perfect landing. Rurin realizes that the river is really wide, but Elle points that this was, and not a river. But Rurin, quickly taking her words back, says that she knew that. Elle knows that she always been like this and leaves the topic behind. Elle gives an idea that how about playing in the ocean after catching some Baranerics. Rurin's mind diverts as she liked the idea of playing in the ocean after catching Baranerics. Rurin asks that how much do they have to catch, which is about 10 Baranerics. Rurin also makes a bet that slower one has to do the dishes. Elle quickly taunts her that don't regret it afterwards, besides that there are not many dishes to do since the restaurant was closed. At the restaurant, it seems that Creston, Elena, and Deeran are waiting outside the restaurant, and they all look very weak, as they had no food. Creston points that he has been waiting since the lunchtime. Deeran also tells that he made up his mind to come out of the castle to find that it is closed. Elena questions that if he knows this place, and also tells that she hasn't eaten anything since breakfast for her pasta at this restaurant. Diren explains that the owner of the restaurant that is Ellison is his teacher, and he came again because the food he tried last time was so delicious. But it seems like he is not here. Another portal opens, and after catching Baronarix and playing in the ocean, they are finally back at the hill next to the restaurant. Rurin says she can still taste the salt from the ocean water in her mouth. Elle asks if this was fun, to which Rurin replies that yes, this was fun. Also, Elle didn't know that Baronarix would ready to accept control and it would be so easy to catch them. Rurin explains that this was all thanks to Dragon's mind manipulation magic. Elle thanks Rurin and thinks this temporary fence should be enough for the cattle and he will just have to build a place for them to sleep, but he will make that later and proceeds to open the restaurant finally. He notices that Creston and Diren are waiting sadly outside the door of the restaurant for their respective food, but it seems that Elena was knocked out on the ground while waiting for the food. Creston realizes that Elle is finally back. Elle is shocked that they were waiting here for so long. Scene changes, and we see that all three of them now have their respective foods, and they exclaim that they finally feel alive again. Ellison asks what would they have done if he didn't come back today. Creston replies that there would have been 3 graves next to the restaurant because of death by starvation. It turns that Rurin is washing all the dishes, and I suppose that she was the slower one to catch the Baronarix. Creston asks where they have been all this time, to which he says that they were gone to catch some cattle, and Elle explains that he wants some milk produce. Creston supposes that he was the person building behind the restaurant and asks that how is he going to keep them, as he points out that he will need more hands when it gets busy in the restaurant. Elle obviously thought about this and expresses that he wants to hire some new people in his restaurant since someone needs to keep a constant eye on the meadow, and he will have to organize some job interviews as he can't just hire anybody walking out there. Creston, his excitement, says that Elle won't have need to worry about that, and explains that he heard the elves can find out what a person's intentions are, and the young master aka Diran will have to learn to find trustworthy people. Elena and Diren both express that what Creston is saying is true. Creston further says that he met all kinds of people while working as a mercenary and they should give him something in return for making Elle work on his holiday. Elle is just confused in what Creston is saying. Creston tries to explain further that he wants to do the job interviews for Elle and Rurin in exchange for Elle making food for them on his holiday along with Elena and Diren. Now both Elena and Diren is confused at what this man is talking about. We see a poster somewhere in the city saying that Elle's restaurant is hiring people for the meadow. The job interviews for the meadow starts as we see a very long line of people standing in front of the restaurant in the hopes of getting hired. Rurin asks if the job interview is a part of the process of getting useful subordinates. Elle tries to explain that is very similar. Creston asks the first person to come inside of the restaurant, but Creston already fails him and explains that a young guy without any energy can't handle some creatures like Baronarix. He calls for the next candidate. Next person comes and introduces himself as Burnt, applying as a manager for the meadow. He explains that he will do the utmost best no matter the task they assign him to. Creston saw the good impression Burnt gave, but Elena doesn't think that. She fails Burnt and explains that he is full of vulgar thoughts. Creston is very angry and says that they can't have that in the restaurant. Burnt tries to explain that all he did was think that she was really pretty. They both call the next one and tell Burnt to leave. The next person comes in and highlights that he has been managing meadows for past 30 years, and he will make this Greek city's best meadow. Diren comes in contact this time and asks his thoughts on the welfare of Baronarix. Candidate gets confused as Diran pulls out a scroll with a bunch of things written on it, and asks him if he has any plan regarding nights and holidays, and also asks if he has clear rules like punishment when it comes to crimes involving Baronarix or not. He also asks his thoughts about the incentives related to the production of milk, and it is given that he already has plans to prepare for future competitions. He also explains that he is curious as to how E will deal with illness and injuries of the cattle. Diren further explains that this place is not just any pasture, and says that he is a baron that cares about the cattle as if they were civilians, and he shouldn't take this lightly. Candidate thinks they all a bunch of crazy people, and he leaves. This move makes Diren very mad as he asks where he was going, abandoning the civilians. Both Rurin and Elle are left confused, and she exclaims that she didn't know getting a subordinate was such a difficult thing. They call next applicant and fire him immediately because Creston remembers that this was the guy who wanted to start a fight in his butcher shop a while ago. They few applicants goes by and we see the reasons of denying them that they either looks at Elena with weird eyes or couldn't reply to the questions of Diren. Next person enters and was about to speak something, but Creston already fails him with the reason that his gaze was too weak. Elena tells he was staring at her also. He couldn't give proper answers to Diren's questions. Elle is just crying in the back as they fail all the people in the quay and he couldn't get anybody to work for him. There is a funny moment though where Creston fails an applicant as he says he feels like failing him and fails everybody next in the QA. He realizes that there are no more candidates left, and he thinks that the reason is because the salary on the recruitment announcement was 2 or something. But we and Elle know the reason behind is the recruitment judges themselves. Elle is very angry and sad at same while Rurin tries to calm him down. Elle asks Creston to stop the interviews and explains he will do the next interviews alone, and is very thankful for what they did in favor of him. When suddenly someone excuses and wants to give the interview, everyone became quiet. It seems like Creston knows this person named Miltine. Miltine explains that she came here after seeing the announcement poster and asks if she can work there. Elle and Mr. Knoll are surprised to see Miltine at Elle's ranch. Mr. Knoll asks her why he was there instead of being with Ment on a mission. Ment and his mercenary troops were assigned to guard a caravan of merchants. Miltine replies something terrible has happened while they were on the mission. Some bandits had attacked them in the way, and Ment fell off of a cliff while fighting the bandits. Both Elle and Mr. Knoll are shocked to hear the news. Knoll inquires about Ment's current condition, fearing the worst. But to everyone's relief, Ment has recovered from his injuries, but sadly, he is unable to use his leg anymore. After the incident, Ment decided to retire from the mercenary, and Miltine followed him by leaving the mercenary too. Elle tells Elena that since Ment has already recovered, she won't be able to help much in the healing process. But still, Elena insists she has to meet him in person first to confirm. Meanwhile, Rurin points out that if Ment is hurt, then why does Miltine want to work with them after leaving the mercenary instead of Ment? Elle shouts at her for being inconsiderate, but we see that Miltine is starting to turn red on the other side. She tells everyone that when Ment got hurt, she had no purpose to continue in the mercenary. She wants to be with him all the time. She wants to work with him on a ranch together. Everyone is shocked by her revelation. She's clearly in love with Ment, and everyone can see it on her face. Knoll curiously asks about her age. She replies that she'll be turning 29 this year. So there's a 13-year age gap between her and Ment. Elle thinks it's probably okay to have such a big age gap and asks Elena if it's the same among elves too. Elena replies that it's not that simple, and it's a bit different in the case of elves. Miltine then adds that if she doesn't get to work on the ranch, she'll rather die starving in the streets. Rurin is impressed by her determination and accepts her offer. Elle is happy to have her and Ment work on their ranch too, but still, he asks Miltine if she has consulted with Ment yet. Miltine replies that she hasn't told Ment about it yet, as she is planning to tell him when she gets the first milk from the ranch on her own. Ment had taught her everything from fighting and bookkeeping in the mercenary. This time she wanted to be the one teaching about working on a ranch. Thus, she wants to work alone first. Everyone is impressed by her passion, and Elena remarks that the passion for love is indeed something else. Hearing Miltine's resolution, Elle also gets an idea of the perfect dish to prepare for Ment using milk from the ranch. The next day, Miltine joins Elle to work on the ranch. Miltine calls Elle manager and asks what she should be doing on her first day. Elle is surprised to be called manager, but he assigns her with the task of taking the cattle, the baronerics, out of their fence to graze. Miltine heads over to the cattle fence. Initially, she thinks it won't be that hard taking the cattle out to graze, but it turns out that the simple process needs a lot of effort too. Even though the cattle are quite calm, they refuse to move an inch even after Miltine's repeated attempts to move them out. Then she is given the task to change the hooves of the cattle, as unlike wild baronerics, domestic ones require hoof maintenance too. She fails in completing this task too, as the cattle simply kicked her away every time she tried changing their hooves. The next day she is given the task to dry out the hay for later use. But the cattle came running towards the hay to feast on them. Thus, Miltine fails this task too. After a few more days of hard work and failures, Miltine falls to the ground and is feeling disheartened. She was so confident before joining the ranch, but after working there for a few days, she feels that she is terrible at work.